Hello, my name is Jason Cannon, and I'm the author of Linux for Beginners, as well as the founder of the Linux Training Academy. When I ask people to tell me what their biggest challenge is to learning Linux, they all say the same thing: time. And that's why I've created this course. Give me just 45 minutes a day for the next 5 days, and I will teach you exactly what you need to know about the Linux operating system. You'll learn the most important concepts and commands, and I'll even guide you step by step through several practical and real-world examples. If you can spare just a few minutes a day and want to learn the ins and outs of the Linux operating system, join me and the thousands of other students in this course today. Welcome to the Learn Linux in 5 Days course. On day 1, you'll learn what Linux. Welcome to the Learn Linux in 5 Days course. On day 1, you'll learn what Linux is, how it came to be, and some of its strengths and weaknesses. You'll also learn a few different methods to gaining access to an already installed and running Linux system. If you want to learn how to install Linux on your own, don't worry, you'll learn how to do that too. Finally, on day 1, we'll talk about the various ways to connect to a Linux system and the software you'll need to do so. You'll start out day 2 by learning about the Linux directory structure and where various components of the operating system reside. Next, you'll get an introduction to the Linux command line interface and learn some of the most essential and often used commands. Even the most experienced Linux users need help from time to time, and you'll learn how and where to find that as well. You'll also learn about the superuser account, why it exists, and when you need to use it. You'll wrap up day 2 by learning some directory shortcuts and how to navigate about the file system. Day 3 will include lessons on file and directory permissions. You'll learn how to read permissions, what they mean, and how to set them. You'll also pick up some tips on working with groups and the permissions you should use when doing so. Next, you'll learn 2 commands that will help you find any file or directory on a Linux system. You'll learn how to view the contents of files and how to edit them. We'll also cover command line editors as well as editors that you can use in a graphical environment. You'll start out day 4 by learning how to delete, copy, move, and rename files and directories. You'll tackle input and output redirection before learning how to compare the contents of files and directories. Next, I'll show you how to search for data within files. You'll learn how to customize your command line shell prompt to your liking and learn how to use aliases. Finally, on day 4, you'll learn how to transfer data between your local operating system and a Linux host. You'll even learn how to copy files from one Linux system to another. On the final day, you'll learn how to examine and manipulate processes and jobs. You'll learn how to automate tasks and make them recurring events. We'll talk about how to switch between users on a Linux system too. You'll also pick up some tips that will greatly speed up your workflow at the command line. Finally, you'll wrap up the course with learning how to find, install, update, and remove software. In this lesson, you're going to learn what a Linux distribution is, what the most common Linux distributions are, and how to choose the right one for you. Generally, when someone uses the term Linux, they're referring to the Linux operating system as a whole. An operating system is a collection of software that manages hardware resources and provides an environment where applications run. The operating system allows applications to store information, send documents to a printer, and interact with users, for example. A Linux distribution is simply a collection of software and applications bundled together and distributed as a single operating system. For example, one Linux distribution might come with one particular web browser installed, while another Linux distribution will come with a different web browser installed by default. You'll be able to browse the web on either distribution, but the specific piece of software used to do that might be different. It's important to point out here that the software that comes installed by default can be changed. If you don't like the web browser that's shipped with the Linux distribution you're using, you can install another one and use that. You can think of a Linux distribution as a curated collection of software that works well together, but you're more than free to use the software and applications that you like best. Before we continue, I'd like to point out that you'll often hear the term distribution shortened to distro. Also, some people refer to the various distros or distributions as flavors. What every Linux distribution has in common, though, is the Linux kernel. Again, typically when the term Linux is used, it refers to the Linux operating system as a whole. However, it can refer to just the Linux kernel as well. The Linux kernel is the core or the heart of the operating system. It's the layer that sits between the hardware and applications. Said another way, it's the intermediary between software and hardware. However, to have a useful operating system, you need other components in addition to the kernel. These components can include system libraries, graphical user interfaces, email utilities, web browsers, and other programs. To summarize, a Linux distribution is the Linux kernel and a collection of software that, together, create an operating system. By far, the two most popular Linux distributions used in information technology departments and by Linux professionals are Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Ubuntu. So if you plan to use Linux in your current or future career as a Linux system administrator, a Linux systems engineer, or even a database administrator or software developer, then I highly recommend focusing on these two Linux distributions. You can forget about the literally hundreds and hundreds of Linux distros and choose between Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Ubuntu. By the way, you'll often see Red Hat Enterprise Linux abbreviated as RHEL and pronounced RHEL. If you want to work for large traditional organizations like financial institutions, transportation companies, telecommunication corporations, large retailers, healthcare organizations, or governmental agencies, then you should choose Red Hat. Up until recently, you needed to pay for a license to run Red Hat at all. However, at the time of this recording, Red Hat now lets individuals run up to 16 systems without having to pay for a license. It wouldn't surprise me if this changes again. So to avoid managing and paying for licenses, you can use a Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivative that's completely free. The two most popular free Red Hat Enterprise Linux derivatives are Alma Linux and Rocky Linux. They are really Red Hat with the branding and logos replaced with either Alma logos or Rocky logos. Either one is perfect if you're going to be running Linux for personal projects, at home, or want a Linux distro to practice on. I would also like to quickly mention that CentOS Linux used to fill the role of a free Red Hat Enterprise Linux clone. However, it recently moved from being a clone of Red Hat to being more of a preview of what is coming to Red Hat. When this change happened, CentOS became CentOS Stream, and people who needed or liked having a clone of Red Hat Enterprise Linux started using Alma Linux or Rocky Linux. Now, if you want to work for a startup or smaller, more nimble web-based companies like software as a service type businesses, social networking sites, smaller e-commerce stores, or companies that rely heavily on cloud computing, then Ubuntu is the distribution for you. If you're using Linux strictly for fun, for personal projects, or just want to see what other distributions have to offer, feel free to try out some other popular distros such as Linux Mint, Manjaro, Pop! OS, Fedora, Debian, OpenSUSE, Arch Linux, and Slackware. When choosing a Linux distro for personal use, it mainly comes down to personal preference and if you like most of the software that comes installed by default. Of course, don't forget Alma Linux and Ubuntu. They make great distros for personal use as well. Ultimately, Linux is Linux at the core. No matter which choice you make, the Linux concepts are going to be the same. Sure, each distribution is going to be a little different, but if you can do something on one distribution, you'll most likely be able to figure out how to do it on another. What this really means is that you can't make a wrong decision. Know that by simply choosing a Linux distribution, any distribution, you've already made the right choice. To recap, a Linux distribution is the Linux kernel and a collection of software that together create an operating system. The two most popular Linux distributions used in the industry today are Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Ubuntu. If you want to gain Red Hat experience without paying a licensing fee, then use Alma Linux, as it's Red Hat with the branding and logos replaced with Alma Linux branding. In this lesson, you'll learn how to install VirtualBox on Windows. That means this video is for Windows users only, so if you're on a Mac, skip ahead to the next video. Before we install VirtualBox, we need. In this lesson, you'll learn how to install VirtualBox on Windows. That means this video is for Windows users only, so if you're on a Mac, skip ahead to the next video. Before we install VirtualBox, we need to install a dependency named the Microsoft Visual C++ redistributable package. If you're taking this course on the Udemy platform, you'll see a link to the download in the resources section of this lesson. Simply click that link to download the installation file. If you're not on Udemy, you can simply search for Microsoft Visual C++ redistributable package download. Then once you're on the download page, click the download link for the x64 platform. Once the file has been downloaded, click on it to start the installation. Click the check mark to agree to the terms and conditions, and click Install. If you're asked any yes or no questions, simply click on Yes. Now click on Close to complete the installation. Now visit virtualbox.org in your web browser. Now find the link that takes you to the download page. Currently, this link is aptly named Downloads, but it may change in the future. Just simply navigate to the download section of this website. From here, select the file for your platform, which is Windows. So click on Windows Hosts. Once the download is complete, click on the file to begin the installation process. The installation is very easy. We're simply going to accept all the defaults and answer yes to all the questions. So here's a yes or no question, so we'll click on Yes. Now we'll click on Next. Again, we're going to accept all the defaults, so there's nothing to do other than to click on Next. Click on Yes. Again, here's another yes or no question, so click on Yes. Finally, click on Install to begin the installation. At the end of the installation, clicking on Finish will start VirtualBox. Going to minimize the web browser to see VirtualBox. And there it is. The installation has been successful. To start VirtualBox in the future, there are a couple of ways to do it. One way is to click on the search icon and start typing VirtualBox. You'll see the application in the search results. To start it, click on Oracle VM VirtualBox. Another way you can start it is by clicking on the Windows button and navigating to the application. Click on All Apps, and then make sure you're looking for the full name of the application, which is Oracle VM VirtualBox. Click the folder to open up some options, and you'll see the Oracle VM VirtualBox application here, and of course, click it to start it. Now let's install a program called 7-Zip. To do that, visit 7-zip.org. You should see a download link right on the homepage, but if for some reason they change the website, you can always find the download section of the website to go to the full download page. Here I'm just going to click on the download link next to the 64-bit line. Once the download has been completed, click on it to start the installation process. Just like with VirtualBox, we're going to accept all the defaults and answer yes to any questions. Okay, click the Install button. And now the installation is complete, so we can click on Close. In an upcoming lesson, you'll be asked to download and extract the contents of a compressed archive file. You'll do that with a 7-Zip program that you just installed. Here's an example of how to do that. I have a file downloaded that ends in .7z. I've navigated to that file using the File Explorer. It's in my Downloads directory. Now I will click on the file to highlight it, and then right-click the file. If you don't see an option for 7-Zip here, click on Show More Options. Now you'll see the 7-Zip folder here, and hover over it to open up the submenu, and click Extract here. You'll see that a new folder appears. I'm going to double-click in this folder, and then now you can see that the uncompressed file is in that folder. Now you have everything you need to install Linux in a virtual machine using VirtualBox, and you'll learn exactly how to do that in an upcoming lesson.